Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack complex topics and really try to extract those crucial nuggets of knowledge you need to be truly well informed.
That's the goal.
Today, we're plunging into a realm where the ordinary gives way to the utterly bizarre. We're talking about crimes so outlandish, so unsettling, they really stretch the very bounds of belief. You know, sometimes the line between fact and fiction or between the natural and the supernatural just kind of blurs in the public imagination.
It really does. And it leaves us wondering about, well, hidden forces possibly at play.
Exactly.
We're talking about events that even decades later, they defy easy conventional explanation. There's just this lingering chill.
Yeah.
And what's truly fascinating to me is how communities, and individuals too, how they grapple with phenomena that seem to exist entirely outside our usual understanding of the rational world.
And it's those very events, the ones that challenge our assumptions, that we're digging into today. We're taking a deep dive into some of the most infamous supernatural crimes and events.
Right.
These are cases where, strange occurrences, ancient beliefs, or even direct claims of demonic influence became central to terrifying real-world events.
Serious stuff.
Yeah, and for this deep dive, we've been immersed in a stack of sources. We've looked at Beyond Belief, Supernatural Crime Chronicles, The Beast of Bladenboro, A North Carolina Mystery, The Devil Made Him Do It, Arnie Johnson's Possession Defense, the Enfield Poltergeist Investigation, and the Hex House Murder, plus The Vampire of Sacramento, Richard Chase's Reign of Terror.
Quite a reading list. And our mission today essentially is to unpack these chronicles for you, to pull out the most important insights from all those sources. We'll explore the unsettling details, really unsettling, of these strange incidents, the claims of supernatural involvement, and how the justice system and, well, society at large grappled with phenomena that just seem to defy explanation.
Yeah.
What becomes clear as you dive into these stories is how profoundly the human mind interprets the unexplained, and how sometimes the truth can indeed be, well, stranger than any fiction.
So let's unpack this. We're starting our journey in the rolling hills of Pennsylvania, a place where centuries-old folk beliefs took a shockingly deadly turn in what became known as the Hex House Murder.
Yeah.
And this wasn't just a simple crime, right? It was deeply rooted in the world of Pennsylvania Dutch folk magic.
That's exactly where we have to begin to truly understand this case. Before 1928, a practice called powwowing was actually a pretty common and accepted custom in many Pennsylvania Dutch communities.
Powwowing.
Yeah. It's important to clarify, this had absolutely no connection to Native American ceremonies. Completely different thing.
Okay.
Instead, it was this unique, magical, religious folk healing practice, deeply blended with Christian beliefs, and typically passed down through generations within specific families.
So it was seen as something positive then, almost like a form of traditional medicine or maybe spiritual aid?
Precisely. Powwowers were believed to draw their healing power directly from God. They offered cures for various illnesses, protection from evil, and, crucially for this story, hex removal. But their services also extended to things like finding lost items, foretelling the future, or even bringing good luck. Their methods were this fascinating blend of charms, amulets, incantations, prayers, rituals, you name it. It was widely accepted that while technically anyone could learn to powwow, certain families were seen as particularly gifted and maintained these traditions over centuries. Almost like a specialized craft, really.
But every light has a shadow, right? And in this system, the darker side was hexery, or witchcraft.
A fascinating and, well, dangerous contrast. Hexery was believed to draw its power from the devil or other ungodly sources, and it was used to harass neighbors or even commit criminal acts through supernatural means.
So how do people tell the difference between a powwower and a witch?
Well, that's where it got tricky. The term hex doctor could be quite confusing because it sometimes referred to powwowers who were also knowledgeable about hexery and were skilled at battling witches, removing curses. These figures existed in a sort of gray area. Sometimes they'd even cast hexes for a price, or maybe out of revenge. It wasn't uncommon for someone to seek out one hex doctor to remove a curse they thought was cast by another.
Right.
So for many people, distinguishing clearly between powwowers and witches wasn't straightforward at all. And that led to a lot of ambiguity and, frankly, a lot of fear.
So witches were blamed for a really wide range of misfortunes, things that sound quite specific to that rural, sort of agrarian life back then.
Absolutely. Given the societal structure, it makes sense. Many hex attacks were believed to be aimed at animals and crops. Witches keep a blame when cows suddenly stop producing milk, or when seemingly healthy animals died mysteriously without any obvious explanation.
Like finding a cause for random bad luck.
Exactly. Or when entire crop yields just inexplicably failed. For humans, the torments were varied, causing persistent, unexplained illnesses, invisible attacks like seizures or fits, sensations of being pricked or stabbed, or that terrifying feeling of being choked by an unseen force. They were also blamed for just streaks of crushing bad luck that seemed to follow a person around. And fascinatingly, there was this widespread belief that a witch could even transform into an animal, like a black cat, to move about undetected and, wreak havoc.
So any misfortune, really, no matter how mundane it might seem to us now, could be attributed to a hex.
Pretty much, yeah.
And they used magical objects in books too, right? It wasn't just spoken incantations.
That's a key part of the practice. Written amulets and charms were really common. These often contained protective charms, verses from the Bible, typically folded into triangles and then carried on a person or hung in a house or barn for protection.
Okay.
Ritualized mundane objects were also used. They acquired this special purpose through what they call sympathetic magic. This was the belief that evil or disease could be transferred from an afflicted person into an object, which was then disposed of, theoretically taking the hex with it.
Huh.
And this kind of magic was believed to work, but only provided the person truly believed in it. The belief was key.
And then there were the books, the grimoires. These sound like they held immense power in people's minds.
They certainly did. The most famous and widely read was De lang verborgene Freund, which translates to The Long-Lost Friend. It was compiled by John George Holman in 1819.
Holman?
Yeah, he was a German immigrant and a powwower himself in Pennsylvania. And this was the first powwow book to achieve really wide circulation. It's actually been continuously in print since 1820.
Wow, still in print.
Yeah. It quickly became a primary reference for anyone interested in the practice.
And it was almost like a magical object itself, wasn't it? The sources say buyers were told they'd be protected just by carrying it.
You're exactly right about that. The inscription in the front of each edition promised protection from visible and invisible enemies, immunity from drowning or burning, even from unjust sentences in court.
That's quite a promise.
Isn't it? The book contained remedies for common illnesses, charms for healing, protection from weapons, fire, witches, thieves, even detailed instructions for livestock care and fishing. It truly became a cornerstone for anyone trying to understand or practice powwowing. It was viewed almost as a sacred text by some.
But then there was a much darker counterpart, a book that truly instilled fear.
Yes, the 6th and 7th Book of Moses. This book had a far more dangerous reputation. It's rooted in European grimoire traditions, and it was purported to contain secret knowledge directly from Moses himself, stuff not found in the Bible.
Okay, so forbidden knowledge.
Exactly. It was directly associated with hexing, because it supposedly provided instructions for conjuring and controlling spirits and demons. Owning it was considered incredibly dangerous, and reading it could supposedly be fatal, leading to this obsession that believers thought could only be broken by reading the entire book in reverse.
In reverse, wow.
Yeah, it represented a darker, forbidden path.
It's incredible to think that people in the 1920s, in what we consider a modern era, still held these beliefs so strongly. I mean, to the point of violence.
That's the crucial point about the Remmeyer hex murder.
Yeah.
The individuals involved, they weren't just dabbling in folklore for fun. They genuinely believed in magic, believed it worked, and believed it could ruin their lives.
Right.
And they were willing to do anything, literally anything, to stop that perceived supernatural threat. Their entire worldview was fundamentally shaped by these ancient convictions.
And that profound belief brings us directly to the murder of Nelson Remmeyer. Our sources tell us the story began with John Blymeyer. He was a young powwower from a family lineage of healers.
Right, Blymeyer.
He had some early successes, apparently even calmed a rabid dog with a spell. But then his luck seemed to turn, and he became convinced, utterly convinced, he was under a hex.
Blymeyer believed this hex was cast by his great-grandfather Jacob, who was also a powwower. He tried to fight it by moving away, and for a time his luck did seem to improve. However, tragedy struck when his 2 children died in infancy. That loss led him right back to believing he was hexed again, that the curse had somehow returned or never really left.
Oh, terrible.
Yeah. Unable to identify the source himself this time, he started seeking help from other powwowers, including a man named Andrew Lenhart.
And Lenhart, he had a very disturbing history, hadn't he? It seems like he directly contributed to this cycle of paranoia and violence.
He certainly did. It's chilling, actually. One of Lenhart's previous clients, a woman named Sally Jane Hagee, had actually murdered her husband after Lenhard gave her hex-related information, basically feeding her fears and paranoia.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And Bleimeier's own wife, Lily, she started fearing for her safety, especially after Bleimeyer became suspicious of everyone, even her, believing they were somehow part of the hex against him.
So she had him committed.
She did, eventually. She had him committed to an asylum because of his overwhelming hex obsession. But remarkably, he simply walked out 48 days later. Just walked out. Still completely consumed by his delusions.
Unbelievable. So he's out of the asylum, still convinced he's hex, and then he finds others who share this desperate delusion. It sounds like a conspiracy of the hex.
Exactly that. It was 1928. He was back at the cigar factory where he worked, and Bleimeyer met John Curry. Curry was only 14, came from an abusive household, and he met Milton Hess, a farmer whose crops had failed and animals were getting sick.
And they also thought they were hexed.
Both of them believed they were hexed. And this shared, terrifying belief, it only amplified Bleimeyer's own paranoia and his growing sense of urgency. They sort of fed off each other's fear.
And this is where Nellie Knoll, the River Witch of Marietta, comes into the story. She essentially provides the catalyst for the murder, doesn't she?
Knoll, yeah, she was a known local figure, a sort of fortune teller or seer, and she identified Nelson Remeyer, an old powwower, and actually a distant relative of Bleimeyer's, as the excerpt. She claimed she saw it in a vision. Yeah, and ironically, Remeyer was a man who had actually healed Bleimeyer with powwowing when Bleimeyer was a child. It adds this really tragic layer of betrayal to Bleimeyer's distorted perception.
So Knoll points the finger at Remeyer. What did she tell them to do?
Knoll told Bleimeyer, Curry, and Hess that to break the hex, they needed two things from Remeyer. His personal copy of The Long Lost Friend, that specific book.
The powwow book.
Right, and a lock of his hair. They were then supposed to bury these items 6 feet underground. Only then, she claimed, would the hex finally be lifted.
This sounds like a recipe for absolute disaster. What happened when they went to Remeyer's house, acting on these instructions?
It was chaos. On November 26th, Bleimeyer and Curry first went, just the two of them, to try and get the items. But they couldn't find the book, and they felt Remeyer, who was apparently a large man, was too difficult to overpower.
So they came back.
They returned the next evening, November 27th. But this time, they brought Milton Hess's 18-year-old son, Wilbert, for additional muscle. The sources state that Remeyer was ambushed. He was tackled, beaten, and ultimately strangled to death. They claimed he struggled violently, but the intention was clear. Get those items, the book and the hair, the components of the hex cure, by any means necessary.
They even tried to make it look like a robbery, right? They took money, but they left the crucial items, the book and the hair, behind, which is bizarre.
Utterly bizarre, given their supposed goal. They were so focused on the murder, maybe, they forgot the reason they were there.
And then there's that eerie, almost symbolic detail about the fire.
It's a detail that really adds to the strange narrative of this case. They doused Remeyer's body with kerosene and set it alight. They were hoping to burn down the house and destroy all evidence.
That it didn't work?
No. The fire, inexplicably, mysteriously went out, leaving critical evidence behind. That allowed for the discovery of the body 2 days later. Alice Remeyer, Nelson's former wife, she told the police about Bleimeyer's suspicious visit just days before, and Bleimeyer and Curry were quickly identified.
The media, of course, must have gone absolutely wild with this story.
Oh, it became a sensational national story. It was dubbed the York Witchcraft Murder. Every bizarre detail of Bleimeyer's hex-obsessed life was splashed across newspapers nationwide.
And the trial.
Hess, the younger one, he received 10 years for his involvement. Bleimeyer and Curry, the main actors, they received life sentences. Though it's worth noting, they were later paroled, serving significantly less time than you might expect, given the severity of the crime.
This murder didn't just end a life, though. It ignited a much broader hex scare across the region, didn't it?
Precisely. The murder fundamentally shifted public perception of folk magic in that area. What was once maybe seen as a quaint, somewhat harmless custom now seemed like a dangerous dark force lurking beneath the surface.
Right.
Practitioners were no longer just seen as eccentric or maybe a bit backward. Suddenly, they were potentially dangerous figures capable of inciting murder.
And there were some highly questionable claims made by officials too, weren't there? Seemingly feeding right into this panic.
Indeed. The York County coroner, L.V. Zack, for instance, he dramatically claimed that 5 children's deaths in the preceding 2 years were caused by powwowers. He alleged parents chose folk healers over doctors.
But was there evidence?
Well, he later admitted there were no formal investigations, no proof to back these claims up. But the damage was done. It fueled sensational headlines like "Death of 5 babies laid to witch cult," cementing the public's fear.
And other unrelated cases were then quickly linked to this hex panic, even when the connections seem pretty tenuous now.
Yes, exactly. You had the case of Verna Delp, 21 years old, found poisoned with magic charms. Her death was linked to a powwower named Charles T. Bells. But later it came out she was pregnant, the case remained unsolved, and Bells was eventually released.
Ah,
Then there was Mrs. Harry McDonald, who died from severe burns after using a hex doctor's ointment. The theory sensationally suggested it was some kind of flammable magic. Norman Bechtel, a Philadelphia man found with 9 stab wounds and what looked like occult cuts, initially labeled a hex murder, before it was confessed to be related to a blackmail scheme, nothing to do with magic.
okay.
And Mrs. Susan Mummy, killed by a shotgun blast. The man who confessed, Albert Shinsky, claimed self-defense because she had put a hex on him. He was sent to a mental institution. These cases show how easily that narrative of hex murders was applied once the panic set in.
So it really seemed to solidify public fear, even if many of the connections were, well, shaky at best.
It absolutely did. The societal war on hex beliefs intensified. School systems started actively educating against them. Authorities began prosecuting powwowers for practicing medicine without a license. It all pushed the practice further underground.
Does it still exist?
Well, the sources suggest it still persists today in some forms, but believers are apparently far less likely to be driven to murder.
This case, it really crystallizes the profound danger when a community's shared epistemology, their very way of knowing what's real, collides with these deeply held fears. It reveals how folk belief, when taken to its absolute extreme, can create its own kind of logic that bypasses reason, turning superstition into a deadly framework for action. It forces us to ask, what does this all mean for understanding human behavior and societal fear? Especially when the lines between what is believed and what is real become so dangerously blurred.
It highlights a crucial point, I think. For many people back then, the supernatural wasn't a metaphor or some quaint story. It was an active, malevolent force in their lives.